Why is it that goodness, cleverness, even strength can so easily fail to shield us from harm? Why are kind souls wounded, honest workers overlooked, the clever outmaneuvered, the strong brought low? You've seen it, surely. The careful student who follows every rule yet still faces injustice. The giving friend who reaches out until their hands are empty, only to be betrayed or forgotten. There's a gnawing question here, one we're encouraged to ignore. If we follow the script we're handed, if we act kindly, justly, sincerely, why isn't that enough? Shouldn't the world reward virtue, or at least defend it? From childhood, we are steeped in stories that promise the good will prevail. Fairy tales, fables, even schoolyard mottos speak of karma, cosmic justice, the reassuring symmetry of rightness leading to safety. Parents and teachers urge us to be nice, to do the right thing, to tell the truth, as though these behaviors are an amulet against life's rough edges. Modern psychology gives us the idea of manifesting abundance through positive thinking, while culture at large repeats that authenticity is the path to respect and fulfillment. But pause just for a moment and think back. Can you remember a time when you did everything right, followed every guidepost, yet still found yourself hurt, dismissed, or left behind? Perhaps it was in your job after years of dutiful labor. Maybe it was in love or in an act of courage or honesty that was met not with appreciation, but with derision or loss. We brace ourselves against disappointment with platitudes. Life isn't fair. Everything happens for a reason. But such phrases only glaze over the sting rather than explaining it. The world, it turns out, is no impartial courtroom with an incorruptible judge handing out verdicts based on merit. It rarely notices our virtues or keeps score. It plays by different rules, ones few of us are ever taught, and even fewer truly understand. Do you ever get the sense you're playing chess when everyone else is secretly shooting craps? Do you suspect that somewhere behind the polite faces and the formal rules, there's a different game being played, with higher stakes and rougher tactics? The truth is, many of us live as if we're still sitting in that imaginary courtroom, waiting for the world to deliver what's fair. But the world is not run by courtly logic. It is run, much of the time, like a game. Some people know the secret pathways, the rules behind the rules. Others are pawns, believing that their straightforward moves and declared intentions will keep them safe, only to find themselves manipulated, outplayed, exposed. You can be moral, hardworking, sincere, all worthy qualities, but if you are naive about how the game is actually played, you risk becoming its collateral damage. So, what prevents a person from being broken or consumed by this system? Surely it's not the thickness of their wallet, nor the height of their pedestal. The truly untouchable individual is not always the most powerful, feared, or revered. In fact, it's not even the most overtly tough or aggressive. There is a kind of person, rare but unmistakable, who seems immune to shaming, exclusion, or manipulation. They move through chaos with an ungraspable grace. No insult seems to stick to them. No betrayal leaves them undone. They aren't unfeeling, nor do they dominate others through fear. Instead, there is an unpredictable current to them, a depth that cannot be mapped or controlled. Who are these people? And how, if at all, does one join their ranks? Not to dominate, but to survive, evolve, and ultimately to thrive, undiminished by the storm? This is not a prescription for cynicism, nor a call to be cruel or manipulative. Rather, it's a challenge. Could there be a third way, beyond passive vulnerability and brute aggression? Is there a path to becoming impossible to hurt, not through thick walls or sharp weapons, but through a kind of inner alchemy, a transformation of how we see ourselves and play the world's game? What if true safety lies not in never being touched, but in learning the secret art of changing so that the blows of life cannot break us, but only shape us, sometimes even setting us free? If you've ever wondered why your virtues failed to shield you, or if you've felt invisible to any sort of cosmic justice, know that you are not alone, and that the answer may not be to abandon all goodness, but to see with new eyes and to step willingly into a different mode of being. The journey begins with questioning everything you thought you knew about fairness and protection, and ends, perhaps, with the discovery of a kind of invulnerability very different from what you've been promised. Will you risk peering behind the curtain and learning the game's secret rules? Do you dare to become someone who cannot be undone, not because you are hard or hidden, but because, in changing how you engage with the world, you become elegantly unbreakable? Have you ever wondered why the people who command the most silent awe in the room are rarely the ones who speak the loudest or explain themselves the most? There is a peculiar kind of power rooted not in transparency, but in unreadability, a power that makes some utterly untouchable, eluding even the most persistent attempts to define or control them. It's a paradox. In a world obsessed with being seen, understood, and validated, those who manage to cultivate a certain opacity become magnets for respect, curiosity, and, perhaps most importantly, autonomy. Let's delve into how this works and what it means for you. From an early age, we're conditioned to think that respect is granted to those who are open, honest, and above all, agreeable. We're taught to explain our actions, justify our feelings, and ensure that we're comprehensible to others. Yet, it's often this very inclination toward communicative openness that makes us vulnerable. The predictable person, a creature of clear motives and readable emotions, becomes easy prey for those who traffic in manipulation. Have you noticed how swiftly people maneuver around those whose intentions are all on display? When every thought and feeling is revealed, others collect that information not just for understanding, but for leverage. This is the first secret. To seek social respect by being understood is to offer yourself as a puzzle already solved. Genuine respect, the kind tinged with caution and awe, is often reserved for what others cannot easily decipher. Think of the enigmatic leader who rarely speaks at meetings, the friend who listens more than they respond, the colleague who receives criticism without visible reaction. Bodies in history and fiction alike, the inscrutable sovereign, the silent samurai, the masked vigilante, teach us that ambivalence and restraint endow an aura that clarity never could. But how do you build this mantle of unreadability without simply withdrawing, becoming a shadow instead of a presence? The path is not about avoidance, but about strategic engagement with ambiguity. Silence is more than the absence of speech. It is the creation of space. When you receive praise or criticism, what would happen if you responded with a brief nod, an unreadable half-smile? What if you answered questions with questions or allowed silence to fill the space where explanations are demanded? Each time you resist the urge to fill the air with your reasons, you subtly shift the burden of uncertainty onto others, inviting wonder, hesitance, and yes, respect. Consider practical applications. The next time you feel a surge of defensiveness, the urge to justify yourself to a spouse, a boss, a friend, pause. What if you offered only the simplest answer, or none at all? Each word, after all, is a thread into the tapestry of your inner life. If you hand out the whole skein, don't be surprised when someone begins unraveling it. The less you reveal, the fewer tools others have, be they well-meaning or otherwise, to anticipate, outmaneuver, or diminish you. This is not to advocate for coldness or emotional inaccessibility, but for mastery over your own emotional display. Think of your face and body, Every smile, frown, or nervous twitch is data that reveals your inner state. Consider how professional poker players sit, back straight, hands still, eyes blank. Their emotional control is not coldness, but defense, a conscious act of keeping their cards unshown. What would it be like to respond to frustration not with a visible sigh or a roll of the eyes, but with composed stillness? Or to receive disappointment with a steady gaze, unflinching, so that nobody, not even the keenest observer, can read the direction of your next move? Ambiguity is not absence, but tension. Stillness is not invisibility, but presence magnified by mystery. When you cultivate these habits, you become fundamentally harder to classify, predict, or undermine, which is precisely what makes you untouchable. Let's be clear. Unreadability is not achieved by disappearing. Fading into the background, becoming excessively mute, or removing yourself from engagement altogether may protect you from immediate scrutiny, but it also renders you irrelevant. The power of ambiguity depends on selective participation. You must be present, but never fully revealed. Oscar Wilde once said that to define is to limit. If you present yourself only in partial glimpses, like an iceberg floating serenely above fathomless depths, you invite both interest and caution. People keep their distance, not out of coldness, but out of respect for the mysteries they sense, but cannot quite grasp. With this in mind, beware the opposite danger. In seeking unreadability, do not construct a mask so impenetrable that people simply stop trying. Humans recoil from what disappears entirely. You must offer just enough engagement, a spark of wit, a glimmer of warmth, a flash of insight to keep others intrigued. The key is to ensure that what you reveal is never the whole story. Cultivating unreadability is, then, a form of power rooted not in deception, but in discretion, a quiet, deliberate withholding that demands reverence. Ask yourself, the next time you feel compelled to explain, is this explanation necessary, or am I merely seeking approval at the cost of my own defense? Would silence serve me better? Who profits from my predictability? In answering these questions, you will begin to discover the subtle forms of power that lie in what you do not say, in the mysteries you retain, in the unfathomable edge of your own autonomy. And as you hone these strategies, people may not be able to read you, yet they will almost certainly respect you and tread a little lighter in your presence. But before we lose ourselves in admiration of unreadability, unpredictability, and that cool emotional distance, the tools that can make one so alluringly opaque, it's worth stepping into the shadows, feeling around for the snares that might await you there. Is it wise, after all, to cultivate unreadability? Is unpredictability always a virtue, or can it be a cloak for something far less noble? What are the costs of wrapping yourself in mystery, and at what point does the elusive become simply unreachable? Think for a moment about those rare individuals you've known who remain almost entirely unreadable. You cannot guess if they're pleased or unimpressed, if they will show up tomorrow or vanish for weeks at a time. Now, consider how you felt in their presence. Did you lean in, hoping to close the distance, or did you begin to feel tired by the effort, even quietly resentful of their resistance to connection? Here lies the first sharp edge of cultivating unreadability, the risk of isolation. Where it once seduced, too thick a fog of mystery eventually frustrates. Admiration can curdle into suspicion, even contempt. No one wants to invest endlessly in a riddle with no payoff. It's not just that unreadability complicates intimacy. There's a deeper risk, too, one that stalks the emotionally distant. Sometimes, in seeking to be unknown, you end up unknown, even to yourself. Aloofness can become a hardened shell, protecting you from the pain of being truly seen, but barring out the warmth of genuine contact as well. Is it possible that the armor you fashion to keep others guessing ultimately keeps you alone? There's a necessary balance, then, between presence and withdrawal, a dance of familiarity and surprise. How can you be visible enough to inspire trust, but elusive enough to evade confinement? Imagine an actor on stage, their movements precise, their voice clear, yet something in their eyes holds a secret. The audience is drawn in, sensing there is more than what meets the eye. In our daily lives, we take on roles for our families, our colleagues, our lovers, refusing to reduce ourselves to a single, worn script. Is that not the challenge we all face, remaining vivid, even familiar, but never quite predictable? When it comes to influence, familiarity breeds comfort, but predictability breeds disregard. Consider the paradox. Both kindness and punishment wither when doled out along a schedule. If kindness is expected, she always bakes cookies on Fridays, or he delivers praise in every meeting, gratitude fades into entitlement. The power of a reward, a gesture, a recognition multiplies precisely because it cannot be taken for granted. Likewise, punishment given like clockwork ceases to sting. It becomes part of the landscape, endurable and even ignorable. But a decisive, unexpected sanction? It sears, memorable precisely because it violated the sleepwalking expectation that things will go as usual. In this way, rarity and decisiveness sharpen both edges of the social sword. Why does all this matter so much? Why do we crave predictability in others even as we recoil from being pigeonholed ourselves? The answer lies in our oldest neural wiring. Uncertainty, to the mind evolved for survival, looks perilous. To know is to control. To know the patterns is to predict safety or danger. Someone unreadable provokes curiosity, yes, but also unease. They remind us, in their refusal to display all their cards, that we do not have the world nearly as mapped as we hoped. Some are drawn in, seeking to decode the mystery. Others back away, wary of what they cannot anticipate or influence. Unreadability can confer power. It's a shield and a tool. But wielded without care, it can also spark fear, breed misunderstanding, sow loneliness. There are those drawn irresistibly to the enigmatic, and those for whom ambiguity is nothing short of threatening. The very trait that can disarm or delight some will arouse suspicion or frustration in others. How, then, do you wield this element of the unknown with wisdom? Perhaps it comes down to introducing unpredictability and ambiguity with routine, not as a performance, but as a choice against the easy comfort of categories. If you let yourself be fully defined, you make yourself simple, digestible, controllable. But if, every now and then, you let silence answer a question or change a habit just as others begin to expect it, you remind the world and yourself that you are more than the sum of your patterns. This is not about being needlessly difficult or contrary, but about preserving your freedom from manipulation, your right not to be dismissed as known. So I invite you to consider, in your own life, how have you managed the delicate balance between being open and being inscrutable? When have you leaned too heavily on routine, and when have you dared to be a little unreadable, to let others sense that you carry depths not yet revealed? Notice how people respond. Do they draw closer, or do they shy away? What, in the end, do you risk by refusing to be entirely predictable? More intriguingly, what might you gain? In the end, perhaps the richest life is lived walking the line between intimacy and ambiguity, never trading away all one's mystery for comfort, nor hiding so thoroughly that no one can find their way in. And so, as the conversation circles toward its natural resolution, let's draw together the threads of these explorations and hold them up to the light. What, after all, have we been chasing through these winding corridors of thought? Was it merely a set of tactics, ways to appear more mysterious or less accessible? Or was it something far deeper, a transformation of one's very foundation? If we are honest with ourselves, the real strength never belonged to the loudest or the most conspicuous. It was never the one who relied on grand gestures or who burned bright with constant explanations and appeals for validation. Instead, strength dwells in the shadows, in the poised silence that cannot be easily read or manipulated, that invites both respect and a hint of caution. Think of the people who have, perhaps almost reluctantly, commanded your attention, not by what they declared, but by what they withheld. Was it their clever words or their quiet restraint, their familiarity or their sense of reserve? In a world obsessed with the visible, status updates, confessions, endless conversations, how rare it is to encounter someone whose presence is a riddle, whose energies don't yearn to be spent in the open marketplace of approval and scrutiny. It is a kind of strength that does not parade itself. It moves like the deep current beneath the surface, shaping the flow of interactions, quietly immune to the tides of gossip, admiration, or envy. Let's remember, none of this is about cultivating fear or about hoarding power for power's sake, nor is it about desperately assembling layers of armor to shut the world out. The true art is in becoming fundamentally unbreakable, impervious to crude attempts at manipulation or seduction, not because you guard your heart with steel, but because you have, gradually, rendered yourself illegible to those who would claim to know your every move. The most enigmatic among us are not cold or calculating. They are, paradoxically, the most free. They are not untouched by feeling, but simply no longer beholden to the quicksilver moods and judgments of the crowd. Does not this, in the end, offer a kind of protection impossible to counterfeit by mere bluster or affect? Consider for a moment the passage from transparency to unreadability and what it demands. Many begin as open books, pages easy to read, margins inviting annotation. It's a place you may well know, perhaps too intimately. At first, this openness seems noble, even generous. But soon enough, you sense the hidden risk. Your story lies vulnerable to revision, your motives mapped out by others, intentions twisted, weaknesses exposed for anyone to press. One day, you feel the gears of someone else's will turn inside you. You shudder at how simply you have been played. And then, quietly, necessity carves out your transformation. There is pain, but there is also liberation in closing the cover ever so slightly. Each word withheld, every gesture chosen with care, forges a new you, a source of curiosity and respect, someone no longer so easily bent or known. But change is a slow, organic process. How does one move toward such unreadability without becoming cold or opaque, haunted by isolation? You cultivate inner silence, learn to watch, to listen, to weigh words before casting them into the world. You choose presence over performance, depth over display. Break the circuit of compulsive explanation. Allow your mysteries to breathe and multiply. The result is not loneliness, but a freedom bristling with possibilities, a richer kind of connection built on intrigue and mutual respect, not ready-made answers and quick appraisals. So, let me leave you with this. What might your life look like if you were no longer compelled by the knee-jerk hunger for approval, the anxious itch for someone to read you, to understand and define you? Imagine, just for a day, the strength of holding yourself within yourself, of nurturing that quiet center immune to the world's fitful demands. Might you become someone others approach differently, sometimes with curiosity, often with admiration, and always with a measure of caution? Would you not, then, wield a kind of power so subtle it defies easy imitation? I challenge you, as you step from this conversation back into the buzzing theater of daily life, to question the tireless chase for appraisals, to see that every moment spent cultivating enigma is a step toward autonomy. Hear the world's noise for what it is, a blur, a distraction. Let your unreadability become your shield. Let your silence be charged with meaning, and your presence, finally, become its own force of nature. True freedom is the art of being known, but never entirely understood. Here, in the silent interstice between words and selves, you will find a kind of power that cannot be stripped from you. And perhaps, in that space, you will discover the rarest thing of all, a self that belongs only to you.